He saw me collapse. I know he did. I felt his eyes on me, that pull, that invisible thread that connects a wolf to their fated mate. I felt it snap taut the moment I hit the pavement. My knees gave out first. Then my palms scraped against the cold concrete, tearing open, bleeding. And I looked up, vision blurring at the edges, heart hammering with that sickening mix of pain and recognition. Because I knew him. Even in the chaos of a crowded street, even through the fever burning me from the inside out, I knew exactly who he was. Caden Voss, alpha of the Ironmore Pack, the most powerful werewolf in the Eastern Territories, my mate, and he looked right at me, right through me, and kept walking. Part 1. The girl who didn't matter. My name is Sarah Calloway. And I have never been anyone important. I wasn't born into a powerful bloodline. My mother was an Omega who left the pack before I was born, and my father, well, no one talks about my father. I grew up on the fringes of the Ironmore Pack's territory, in a creaky two-bedroom house that smelled like pine and old books, raised by my grandmother who taught me to be quiet, to be careful, and above all, to be invisible. Wolves like us don't draw attention, she used to say, braiding my hair with fingers gnarled from years of manual work. We survive by staying small. I took that lesson to heart. Maybe too much. By the time I was 19, I had made myself so small that I practically didn't exist in the pack hierarchy. I worked at a small apothecary in Ironmore's lower district, mixing herbal remedies and tinctures for wolves who barely glanced at me when they paid. I had a handful of friends, Poppy, who was human and blissfully unaware of the supernatural world she lived next to, and Dex, a beta wolf from a mid-tier family who had known me since childhood on, treated me like a sister. I had never had a mate. And honestly, I had stopped expecting one. Not every wolf finds their fated mate. The bond is rare, precious, almost mythological in the way the elders spoke about it. Two souls recognizing each other across any distance, any crowd, any chaos. A pull so powerful it rewrites the architecture of your heart. I thought that kind of thing happened to other people. To alphas with strong bloodlines and wolves who had something to offer. Not to me. The day everything changed, I was sick. Not the normal kind of sick. This was something else, something deep and primal, the kind of illness that starts in your bones and radiates outward. I had been feeling it building for 3 days. Chalking it up to exhaustion or a bad batch of nightshade root I'd been processing at the apothecary. I told myself I was fine. I took my own tinctures, slept badly, woke up worse. On the 4th morning, I dragged myself to work anyway. It was a Tuesday. Cold. The kind of autumn cold that gets under your skin and refuses to leave. Ironmore's main street was busy, market day. Wolves and the occasional human weaving between stalls piled with root vegetables and smoked meats and early winter preserves. I kept my head down, my scarf pulled up, my steps measured and deliberate. I made it as far as the cobblestone stretch near the old post office. And then my body simply gave up. It wasn't dramatic at first. My legs just stopped cooperating. I stumbled, caught myself on a lamppost, and stood there for a moment breathing hard, trying to make sense of what was happening. The fever spiked so suddenly that my vision went white. The noise of the market became a roaring, distant thing, like I was hearing it from underwater. And that's when I felt it. The pull. It hit me like a physical force, a warmth in my chest that was completely at odds with the cold shaking through my limbs. And with it came recognition so absolute and so visceral that I actually gasped. My wolf, small and quiet as she had always been, lifted her head for the first time in what felt like years and knew. I turned. Through the crowd, maybe 15 feet away, walking with the unhurried confidence of someone who has never once had to question their place in the world, was Caden Voss. I had seen him before, of course. You couldn't live in Ironmore territory and not know what the alpha looked like. Tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair and a jaw that looked carved rather than grown. He moved through crowds the way alphas always do, the lower-ranking wolves parting unconsciously to let him through without even realizing they were doing it. He was with two of his inner circle, Bryce, his beta, and a woman I recognized as Lena, his head enforcer. He wasn't looking at me. But then he was. Our eyes met, and I know that he felt it too. Because for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. A sharp, almost imperceptible tension. His stride faltered, just slightly, just for one step. Then my knees buckled. My palms hit the pavement. I heard someone nearby make a startled sound, and I looked up from the ground, blood beading on my torn palms, vision swimming, and I found him again in the crowd. He was looking at me. Directly, unmistakably at me. And then he turned away. Said something to Bryce. And kept walking. The three of them disappeared into the crowd like I was nothing. Like I was a puddle on the road he'd made a mental note to step around. I lay on that cold cobblestone for what felt like a very long time, while strangers bent over me asking if I was all right, while the fever sang in my blood and my wolf made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a howl, not a whimper. Something worse. Silence. The complete, devastated silence of something that has been rejected before it even had the chance to speak. Part 2. The fever and the fractured decks found me. He'd been at the market picking up supplies for his mother and spotted the small commotion around me. He pushed through the gathering onlookers, took one look at my face, and had me up in his arms before I could protest. Sierra. Hey. Look at me. There she is. His voice was calm but his hands were not. They were shaking slightly as he checked my temperature with the back of his hand against my forehead. You're burning up. This isn't normal sick. I'm fine, I told him. An obvious lie. He carried me to his truck and drove me to his mother's house, which was closer than my own. Mira Calloway, no relation to me, despite the shared surname that had always amused us, was a mid-tier healer in the pack, experienced and no-nonsense, with kind eyes and a permanently worried brow. She took one look at me and went very still. When did this start? She asked. 3 days ago. Maybe 4. Her eyes met her son's over my head. Something passed between them that I didn't understand. Lie down, she said. I need to examine you properly. What she found, after an hour of careful, thorough work with her hands and her herbs and the quiet diagnostics that healers use, the kind that involve a wolf's enhanced senses as much as any medicine, was something I hadn't expected. Your bond is under strain, she said quietly. That's what this is. I stared at her. My bond. A mate bond. Newly recognized. And already under enormous stress. She sat back, watching me carefully. Sierra, did something happen today? Did you encounter someone who triggered the recognition? The market. The cobblestones. Caden Voss walking away. I was very careful to keep my expression neutral. Tell me what happens, I said instead. When a bond is strained, what does it do to the omega? Because that was the other ugly detail we were dancing around. In a mate bond between an alpha and an omega, the power differential was significant. When a bond was rejected, or ignored, the omega bore the vast majority of the physical consequences. The alpha might feel uncomfortable, might experience some disruption to his sleep, his focus, a vague unease he could probably suppress with a few good training sessions and the sheer force of his rank. The omega got the fever. The physical collapse. The fracturing. It won't kill you, Mira said, and the fact that she felt the need to clarify this told me more than I wanted to know. But it will get worse before it gets better. And if the bond remains completely unacknowledged for too long, she stopped. Tell me. Your wolf could go quiet. Permanently. Her voice was gentle but she didn't look away from me. It's rare. But it happens. Some omegas who experience complete mate rejection, they lose the ability to shift. Their wolf retreats so deep that she can't find her way back. A pause. You would still live. But you would be half of what you are. I looked down at my bandaged palms. The torn skin where I'd hit the cobblestones. The place where, if I closed my eyes, I could still feel the ghost of that pull, that warm, impossible recognition. He had felt it. I was certain of it. And he had walked away anyway. Okay, I said. My voice was remarkably steady. Then I need to figure out how to sever it. Mira blinked. What? The bond. If it's one-sided, if he's not going to acknowledge it, then I need to find a way to cut it myself. Before it takes anything more from me. Sierra, that kind of severance magic is. I know what it is. I had worked in an apothecary for 4 years. I knew exactly what severing a nascent bond required. It was brutal, invasive, and carried its own serious risks. But it was survivable. It's survivable, I said, which is better than what you just described. Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, do you want to tell me who it is? I thought about Caden Voss's face in the moment our eyes met. That fractional, barely there flicker. The step that had almost faltered. No, I said. I really don't. Part 3. What power does to a person. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the severance. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Severing a nascent bond before it fully formed required a specific combination of rare botanical compounds, a wolf willing to act as an anchor, and a window of time during the new moon when the metaphysical membrane around a new bond was at its most permeable. I had the botanical knowledge. I had Dex, who agreed to be my anchor without asking too many questions, bless him. I had to wait for the moon. During those 2 weeks, I kept working. I kept being small and invisible. I mixed remedies and packaged tinctures and kept my head down, and I noticed things I hadn't let myself notice before. About Caden Voss, about the way he ran Ironmore. I had always known in the abstract that he was not a warm man. Alphas rarely were. The position demanded a certain hardness, a willingness to make difficult decisions, to enforce hierarchy when necessary. I had accepted this as simply the nature of things, but watching him now, with new eyes, with the eyes of someone who had felt the mate bond spark and had then watched him step over her like debris, I saw something else. I saw a man who had been trained from birth to view everything as an asset or a liability. His inner circle was composed of powerful wolves from strong bloodlines. His enforcer policies were strict, sometimes punitive in ways that felt more like dominance performance than genuine pack protection. When lower-ranking wolves brought concerns to pack meetings, his responses were efficient and dismissive. He was not cruel exactly, but he was indifferent. And indifference, I was learning, could do just as much damage as cruelty when it came wrapped in authority. Dex confirmed what I was piecing together one evening, over tea at his mother's kitchen table. He's been groomed for it, Dex said, staring into his mug. The alpha thing. His father was the same way. Maybe worse. The whole Voss family philosophy is, wolves have ranks for a reason. You don't blur those lines. You don't invest sentiment in wolves below your station. He paused. It's not personal, Sierra. It's just how he was built. I know. I said, does that help? I thought about it honestly. Did it help? To understand that his walking away had been less about me specifically and more about the machinery of a worldview I had in. Oh, pardon constructing a little, I said, not enough. The night before the new moon, I got a visitor I wasn't expecting. I was alone in the apothecary, after hours preparing the final components of the severance. When the door opened, I looked up, ready to say we were closed, and stopped. Lena, Caden's enforcer. She was a few years older than me, sharp-featured and watchful, with close-cropped hair and the quiet, balanced stance of someone who had trained their body into a weapon. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm closed," I said carefully, "I know." She stepped inside anyway, letting the door fall shut behind her. "This won't take long." I set down what I was working with and waited. "You were on the Market Street 2 weeks ago," she said. "When you collapsed." My stomach dropped. I kept my face still. "Lots of wolves were on the Market Street." He felt it. She said it flatly, without preamble, without softening. "The bond." I could see it in him. "And I could see him recognize you." A pause. "I've worked beside Caden Voss for 6 years. I know what his face looks like when something gets through." The silence in the apothecary was very loud. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Lena was quiet for a moment. "Then, because I watched him walk away. And I watched you hit the ground. And I've been thinking about it since." She looked around the shop, at the bundled herbs, the glass jars of compound tinctures, the mortar and pestle on the workbench. Her gaze landed on what I'd been preparing before she arrived. She was smart enough and experienced enough to recognize it immediately. Her eyes came back to me. "You're going to sever it." Not a question, yes. "Tonight?" "Tomorrow night, new moon." She was quiet for a long moment. "It'll hurt. Yes, you could go to him instead. Confront him. Force the acknowledgement. You have the legal right under pack law. A mate bond is a mate bond regardless of rank. He couldn't deny it without formal proceedings." "No, but you won't." I looked at her steadily. "Would you? Would you go to someone who saw you collapse in the street and kept walking, and demand that he love you? Demand that he build something with you when he's already shown you exactly how much you matter to him?" Lena opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked away. "I didn't think so," I said quietly. Not unkindly. She stood there for another moment. Then she moved toward the door. Stopped with her hand on the frame and didn't turn around. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think he's a fool." A pause. "And I think it's already costing him more than he realizes." She left. I stood alone in the apothecary for a long time after, listening to the autumn wind against the glass, my hands steady above the severance components, my wolf very, very quiet in my chest. "Tomorrow," I promised her. "Tomorrow we cut it clean. And then we start over." Part 4. The severance. The new moon brought cold and silence. Dex had secured us a space deep in the Ironmore woods, a clearing his family had used for generations for private pack rituals, far enough from the main settlement that we wouldn't be disturbed. He built a fire and said very little, which was exactly what I needed from him. Mira had given me careful, precise instructions. She had also held my face in her hands before I left and looked at me for a long time without speaking, and then pressed her forehead to mine in the way older wolves do, the gesture that means I see you, I witness you, you are not alone. I cried a little on the walk to the clearing, not much. Just enough to get it out of my system. The ritual itself took the better part of 2 hours. I won't describe all of it. Some things are private, intimate in a way that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the deep interior landscape of being a wolf, of having a soul that is split into human and animal and learning to negotiate the space between them. Dex held my hands when it was painful. He growled low and steady into the dark when my wolf struggled, a sound that meant anchor, 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 and it helped more than I can say. The bond, when it finally released, felt like pulling a thorn from very deep in your chest. There was a hot, bright flare of pain. There was a sound I made that I hope no one else in the forest was awake to hear. There was a moment of freefall, like something fundamental had let go of me, and I was no longer sure which direction was up. And then stillness. Clean, aching, empty stillness. My wolf was still there. Diminished, grieving in her quiet animal way, but present. She pressed against my ribs from the inside and I pressed back, and we sat with the loss together for a while. Dex's warm hands around mine, the fire crackling, the moonless sky very wide and very dark above the tree line. Okay, he asked after a while. Not yet, I said honestly. But I will be. Part 5. What came after? What I did not expect, what no one had prepared me for, because how could they, was what the severance would do to him. I found out 3 days later, from Poppy of all people, who had heard it from one of the human contractors who worked on Voss pack grounds. Caden Voss had missed his alpha meetings. 2 of them had apparently been described by his beta as out of sorts, which from Bryce was essentially the equivalent of anyone else saying he's falling apart at the seams. There were reports of him training alone at all hours, pushing himself past the point that even an alpha's body could comfortably sustain. I shouldn't have cared. I told myself firmly that I didn't. But then Lena came back to the apothecary. This time it was midday, and she didn't try to be subtle about it. She walked in while 2 other wolves were browsing the shelves, waited them out with patient, slightly terrifying composure, and then turned to me when we were alone. He knows, she said. About the severance. He could feel it when it happened. I kept sorting the order I was filling. My hands were steady. That's not my problem anymore. He's asking questions. About you. About who you are, who your family is. She paused. He didn't know your name before. He knows it now. Good for him, Sierra Lena. I set down the parcel I was wrapping and looked at her directly. He made his decision. He made it very clearly, without hesitation, on a public street in front of hundreds of wolves. I made mine. We're done. There is nothing to unpick here. Lena studied me for a long moment. There was something in her expression that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite admiration, something in between. He wants to speak with you. He can want a lot of things. He's the alpha of this pack. You live on his territory. I'm aware. I held her gaze. And when he has pack business with me, actual pack business, official, through proper channels, I'll respond accordingly. But I don't owe him a conversation about my personal choices. Not after what he did. I paused. Then, more quietly, I almost lost my wolf, Lena. Do you understand that? Whatever he's feeling right now, whatever disruption or discomfort the severance has caused him, that is the smallest possible fraction of what he put me through by walking away. Lena was quiet for a very long time. I know, she said finally, I know, and there was something raw in it that I hadn't expected from her. She left again, and this time. I thought she probably wouldn't be back. I was wrong. It wasn't Lena who came back, it was him. Part 6. The Reckoning. He came on a Wednesday evening, just as I was closing up. I heard the knock, 3 sharp, deliberate raps, the kind of knock that is accustomed to being answered immediately. And when I opened the door and found Caden Voss standing on the step of my small apothecary, all I felt was a very calm, very complete lack of surprise. I had known, I think, somewhere in the back of my mind, that this moment was coming. I had even rehearsed it a little, not the words, but the posture. The steadiness. The refusal to collapse, not again, not in front of him. He was alone. That surprised me more than his presence. We looked at each other across the threshold for a long moment. Sarah Calloway, he said. Alpha Voss, I replied. Polite, neutral. The voice I use for pack officials. Something moved across his face. You know why I'm here. I can guess. May I come in? A pause, a beat in which I heard my wolf stir, still quieter than she used to be, still healing. But present, watching this with calm wolf eyes that held no hope and no fury. Just careful attention? Yes, I said, and I stepped back. He came inside. The apothecary was small, and he was very large, and the space immediately felt different with him in it. Not threatening, but charged, the way air feels before a storm. He looked around the shop. At the herbs and the tinctures and the neat, ordered shelves. At the evidence of a life built quietly and entirely on my own terms. Then he looked at me. I need you to understand, he began, that I didn't. I'm going to stop you there, I said. He stopped, looked faintly startled by it. I'm not interested in an explanation, I said. Not because I don't think you have reasons. I'm sure you have very well organized, internally coherent reasons. But here's the thing, Alpha Voss. I was on that street. I was conscious. I saw your face when you felt the bond. I watched you make a decision in real time. I kept my voice even. Level. Whatever you came here to explain, it doesn't change what I saw. I made a mistake, he said. Yes, I want to fix it. I know you do. I looked at him directly, but the bond is gone. I severed it. That's done, and it can't be undone. What exactly is it you think you're fixing? A muscle jumped in his jaw. He was not, I could see, a man who was accustomed to conversations going this way. But he was holding himself very still, deliberately, carefully still, in a way that told me this mattered to him. That whatever composure he was presenting, something underneath it was less composed. I don't know, he admitted. And the admission seemed to cost him something real. I looked at him for a long time. At this man who had walked away from me. At the architecture of him, the power and the control, and the loneliness that lived underneath it, visible now only because I was looking for it. Because Mira and Lena, and for years of mixing medicine for wolves who never looked up, had trained me to read things that preferred not to be read. Can I tell you something? I asked. He nodded. I am not angry at you, I said. I was for a while. But mostly I was just hurt. And then I was very busy surviving the physical consequences of what you did, which has a way of replacing emotion with practicality fairly quickly. I paused. And now I'm just clear about who I am and who you are, and the fact that those two things, as it turns out, are not compatible. You don't know who I am, he said. And there was something almost desperate in it. I know who you've chosen to be, I replied. Every day you make choices that demonstrate your values. You made one on that market street. It told me everything I needed to know. He stood there. And for a long, terrible moment, I watched something happen in him that I suspected very few people ever got to see, a crack in the structure. Not dramatic. Not the kind of thing you'd make a story of. Just a man, standing in a small apothecary that smelled like pine and dried lavender, understanding for the first time the full weight of a choice he'd made in 3 seconds on a Tuesday morning. I'm sorry, he said. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I nodded. Okay. Okay. Yes, okay. I believe you. I moved to the door and held it open for him. Good night, Alpha Voss. He looked at me. The apothecary door open. The autumn night behind me. That's it? He asked. That's it, I said. You were sorry. I heard you. We're done. He left. I closed the door, leaned against it for a moment in the quiet, with my hand flat against the wood, my wolf stretched, slow and careful, inside my chest, still small, still mending but present. Good, she seemed to say. That was good. Yeah, I whispered. I think it was. Epilogue. What? Small wolves. No months passed. The seasons turned. Winter came to Ironmore with its white weight and its long silences, and I kept my apothecary open through it, kept making medicine for wolves who were slowly, very slowly, beginning to look up when they paid. I heard, through decks and through the ordinary gossip that moves through any community like water through stone, that Caden Voss was changing, slowly, imperfectly. With apparent considerable difficulty, his inner circle expanded, his enforcement policies shifted. He began attending the lower district pack meetings in person, sitting in the back, saying little but listening. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I did what I had always done with things I didn't know how to hold. I put them on a shelf and attended to the work in front of me. I started teaching small classes, Tuesday evenings, in the back of the apothecary. Botanical medicine, pack healing traditions, the kind of knowledge that had always been gatekept by healer families but that I thought, that I believed, should belong to everyone who wanted it. A handful of wolves came at first, mostly young omegas and betas who had nowhere else to learn these things. Then more. Then more. My wolf grew back. Not all at once. Not in any single moment. But increments, tiny daily increments of a wolf were learning that she had the right to take up space, to exist at full volume, to run at the edge of the territory in the blue winter dusk and feel the ground under her paws and the cold air in her lungs and know that she was here, she was real, she was enough. It is a quiet kind of power. The kind built in the gap between what you were told you deserved and what you decided, on your own, to become. My grandmother used to say, wolves like us survive by staying small. She was wrong. She was doing her best, and she loved me, and she was wrong. Wolves like us survive by refusing to let anyone else define the size of what we are. I know that now. I learned it on a cold cobblestone street, looking up at a man who walked away, and choosing, somewhere in the blur of pain and fever, not to make my wolf small enough to fit in the space he decided I deserved. She had always been larger than that we both had.